So without further ado, I am Jeff May, Public Works Director from City of Clyde. I'm going to introduce the five staff. We have Matt McQuillan, our City Manager, Molly Elder, our Communications Specialist, and Jim Hoggley, our City Engineer. So with that, I will turn it over to Rudy and let Rudy introduce you.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm Rudy Casser, Public Works Director, City Engineer for the City of Waukee. Thank you for everybody that's here in person as well as those online. We do have about 20 folks online. We are recording this presentation for this evening, and we'll be posting it to those web pages that Jeff mentioned earlier. In addition to Clive's project web page, we will also have our web page for the City of Waukee, and it'll probably be linked for the majority of the bulk material to the Clive web page. So again, I'll go around and do our introductions. We do have our mayor and a few council members over here, Mayor Courtney Clark, council member Rob Grove, and council member Chris Crone joining us, as well as for city employees, we have City Administrator Brad Dietz, Assistant Public Works Director of Engineering Sarah Kapos, and Assistant Public Works Director of Operations Tim Royer in his citizen capacity here this evening as well. And then we'll let Gabe go around and introduce his Snyder quotes.
Thanks. So Gabe Nelson, I'm an engineer in the transportation group at Snyder and Associates in Ankeny. Got with me in the back of the room here, Steve Tice, Lucas Button, Todd Knox, and Jeremy Schley, who are with our roadway design team. So what we wanted to discuss this evening is, I'll give you kind of a broad overview of what we're trying to accomplish with the entire corridor. The entire corridor, like Jeff said, goes from Northeast Horizon Drive all the way up to Meredith. That's what we're eventually designing. What we're really talking about here tonight is the phase one corridor, which is that Horizon Drive just south of Douglas. And I'll show some maps and diagrams and stuff to give a little more detail on that. So what we are, get this to work, and it's going to advance to okay. So eventual reconstruction is from Northeast Horizon Drive up to just south of Meredith, which the City of Urbandale's already reconstructed the intersection of Alice's Road and Meredith. That will be done in multiple phases over multiple years. The first phase being the one south of Douglas. Project, like I said, project's multiple phases. There will be bicycle and pedestrian accommodations throughout the entire corridor that are planned. We are also going to have significant stormwater management incorporated into the project. That'll manage both the quantity of stormwater and the quality of it, and manage that. I'll get into that a little bit more. There will be landscaping throughout the entire corridor. Those concepts have not been really brought very far yet, and you can see why as we kind of get into some options yet that we have to decide on before we can talk about landscaping. And then of course we're going to analyze intersection treatments, and that's what we'll mainly talk about. This is what the roadway will look like. So it's a 2-lane roadway today. That'll be completely reconstructed, so that we're not widening anything. Nothing you see today will be there into the future. That'll be completely torn out. Grade will likely change everywhere as we drop into an urban section. This is what it'll look like. It's in 120 feet of right-of-way. The phase one corridor is the permanent right-of-way is mostly established through the entire corridor. We will need temporary construction easements outside of that to blend in slopes and things like that. But for the most part, the 120 feet is established through at least the phase one corridor, not so much when you get north of Douglas. We'll have the 2 lanes in each direction. There'll be a 17-foot center median that will accommodate potential of left turn lanes if we need those at certain locations. There's a 12.5-foot lane, so basically a 12-foot drive lane with an additional 6 inches for the curb and gutter. And then a 10-foot trail that'll be on the west side of the roadway, continue up the entire west side of the roadway, 5-foot sidewalk on the east side. Let's see. So as we move forward here, so we already talked about this a little bit. Phase one project, there'll be multiple phases, but the phase one project will stop probably 300 feet south of Douglas, right about the Casey's entrance. So it'll go about that far. We don't want to go any further north than that because that, would get into really having to decide what we're doing at the intersection of Douglas and Alice's Road. So that's why we stopped there for ourselves. Like I said, the 120 foot of right of way is mostly established through the corridor. And this will be 100% funded between the cities. So it's half Waukee, half city of Clive. We don't have federal funding in this phase. And so that's why we can move a little ahead a little faster. So this we would plan on hopefully starting early next construction season. I say 25, 26. It all depends on staging and how early in the year we start, but it'd be the bulk of the 25 construction season and then bleeding into the 26 construction season likely as well. So there'd be future phases. This could be 2 or 3 phases possibly, but we are looking at as part of future phases, expanding Douglas Parkway. So right now it basically ends just west of Berkshire Parkway. We'd look at as a future phase, expanding that all the way that's what, a half mile into west of Alice's Road on Douglas Parkway. We would look at the intersection of Berkshire and Douglas, improving somehow the intersection at that, whether that's simply adding a signal or that's a roundabout or something like that, but we're studying that intersection. And then north of Douglas, that could be potentially 2 more projects where it's Douglas to Berkshire. We're kind of looking at it as a phase, and then Berkshire up to Meredith Drive, potentially another phase, and that could happen. There's no specific order on that or specific timeline on that. The reason why we have that 80 acres off to the west side of Alice's Road, why we're looking at that as well. That's all included in a study area. So that will have federal funding. We already have close to $2 million in federal funding between a couple of the phases right now. So we have to do what's called a planning and environmental linkages study, and the NEPA part is the National Environmental Policy Act. So we have to, the planning and environmental linkages or PEL study, that's looking at various alternatives. So that could be signals versus roundabouts, it could be separate alignments, it could be potentially, there's just a number of alternatives you have to look at as part of that study, and then the environmental impacts of all those. So impacts to properties, impacts to endangered species, but there's just a number of things we look at as part of that. The reason we're looking at it all the way to the that 80 acres to the west is there's a fairly significant stormwater draw that runs across there. At 2 locations, those actually cross Alice's Road, flow through the Verona Hills subdivision. What we're looking at as part of that is stormwater improvements to either slow down the water or redirect the water that's going into Verona Hills, but that's all studied as part of that project, and that's why it's included in that study area. So, like I said, no specific timeline on that. You're going to get invited to meetings in the future that are going to talk about those projects and some of the alternatives and some of the information with that. But this is really going to focus on the south of Douglas corridor. That's okay. So kind of give you one of the first things we did is did a traffic study of the corridor. So we went out and took traffic counts at major intersections. Just generally, there's about 7,900 vehicles a day that travel through the corridor south of Douglas. And 2050 projections are about 16,000 vehicles a day south of Douglas. So how we come up with that is we kind of look at DOT does counts of the corridor every few years. We look at how those grow. We also look at the growth in the over the last 15 crashes off about those 2 minor injuries, 5 possible injuries. So So that a significant cautious for the photo, but so where you looking at so section depending all of the words that have major ones. So we start with the working practice and work on it's allows to things we think about as far as intersection control. So we look at that with the 2023 traffic and basically the intersections of Horizon, signals and roundabouts from whatever you can see about the level of service like that. And generally we consider the level of service. We have to get the delay and it makes sense. And power and power. So change some of them months for
Sorry to interrupt. Is there a way to fix the audio for the folks online? We can't hear anything. It's just garbled.
so one box and signals so then we look at traffic and really everything even if you look at 2050 signals everything performs one roundabout slightly better in the field and there we can actually that's one specific movement of Horizon. We can accept this geometry. Those options really well with so
Sorry, Gabe, I took control.
There. So then we looked at trying to make some other decisions of what could drive that intersection control. We looked at the life cycle cost analysis. So these are the things we prepare with that life cycle cost analysis. So the first two, construction and maintenance, those are direct costs to the cities for having to build and maintain the road. We also look at
Everything on your toes.
yeah, there you go. That's like that. So we also look at crash costs, travel time delay, fuel costs, emissions costs. Those are basically comparing those delays we just popped up so that we can project those out to vehicle savings, emission savings, and stuff like that. That's a cost to the traffic. So we look at all those. I'll pop up some numbers on the next screen, but generally construction and maintenance costs, signals versus roundabouts are actually roughly equal. It's kind of counterintuitive because it looks like a roundabout so much bigger, but when you actually look at the fact that you need left turn lanes, the paving areas become roughly equal. You do need more right of way for a roundabout, but you need these really expensive signals and then you need to maintain the signals. So generally everything kind of balances out from a construction maintenance perspective and they are fairly equal. When you add in those user costs, so we talk about the reduced delay, the reduced the fact that roundabouts are generally safer or have minor fender bender type crashes, and you incorporate all those costs. Generally, a roundabout will cost, on these three roundabouts that we looked at, 23 to 36% less overall. And these are the, if you could. So the next slide here, these are just the numbers, and if you actually add it up like with construction and maintenance costs, you'll see that, it does look like the signal is a little bit more expensive, but for planning level costs, we basically call those a wash. If you add those two columns together, where you really get the difference is, when you start to bring in those, examining the crashes that we normally see at a signalized intersection versus a roundabout. And then the travel time, which is fuel costs, emissions costs, cost of the users. If we look at those over the life of the up to 2050, I believe is where we did the analysis. We can see that there's a significant savings with the roundabouts versus the signals.
Hey, can you go back?
Sure.
Thanks.
Sure. So, so then we can kind of look at, so they both operate fairly well in this corridor. They, for the most part, construction maintenance costs relatively equal. Obviously, the user cost of the traveling public is quite a bit less with the roundabouts. So then we kind of looked at some other pros and cons, I guess, of the different. So when you're talking about a signalized intersection, they generally have a smaller footprint for the most part, unless you start tacking on right turn lanes and things like that. The signalized intersections generally fit in 120 feet or anyway, whereas for a roundabout, we need quite a bit more footprint for that. With signalized intersections, we can add those in the future as traffic requires it. I doubt that if we went that route, that we would actually put signals in the day it opens. It would probably be driven by as the fourth leg of the intersection is added. If there is as traffic picks up, then at some point in the future, you can add the signal at that point. Whereas a roundabout, you basically have to build what you're going to build. It works today and it works in 20. And it's also, it's familiar to drivers. I think we can all say that generally people understand traffic signals, whether they obey them or not, but they generally understand traffic signals. Roundabouts, especially in the western suburbs, I say that they're becoming more common, but maybe a little bit more of an anomaly. With the roundabout, some of the advantages of that is we can slow traffic while reducing delay. So it's kind of we can kind of have the best of both worlds where we keep traffic moving through the corridor. We never have to necessarily stop them for very long, but we can slow people down. One of the reasons that's advantageous in this corridor, or the reason we like the roundabouts for that, is you have on Grand Prairie Parkway, south of Hickman, you have this highly commercial area, this big 6-lane thoroughfare. People are kind of screaming through there past IV. Then we enter a very residential area. So we like the idea of the roundabouts of keeping traffic moving. It's a regional arterial, it's a regional corridor, but we can slow traffic down. So that's safer for pedestrians and bicyclists and stuff like that. So also reduce crash severity. So it's not that there's never a crash at a roundabout. It's that the type of crashes and the speed at which they're happening tend to be property damage only. So people kind of have fender benders. People don't typically get hurt in a roundabout versus a signalized intersection where you get the broadside crashes with people running a red light, or you get rear end crashes of someone slamming on the brakes at the yellow light and someone smashing into them because they're taxis.
I have a quick question. Is there a maximum speed when putting roundabouts?
Yes, there is. So there's basically we want people to come in at 15, 20 miles an hour, and we do that all through geometry. We don't put up a
Yes,
sign.
I mean, sorry, not the roundabout itself, but the road.
No, we do. So the speed limit on the road would be 40 miles an hour, whatever we want to what the speed limit on a major or a minor arterial to be. It's the slowing down we all call it with the geometry of having to drive through the roundabout. So you can't drive forward, you just have to drive all that speed through the roundabout. So yeah, that reduced crash severity, generally safer for pedestrians and bicycle crossings. So that's because of the reduction in the conflict points. So you only have to worry about one lane of traffic at a time, and that driver's only worried about one thing at a time as well, as opposed to a signalized intersection where you've got kind of a lot of different things going on at the same time that you have to worry about. And also, kind of through this and additional opportunities for landscaping, you have the big wide medians everywhere leading into the roundabouts. You got the big center circle. So that's kind of an added benefit of being able to do that versus having a lot of pavement or transport. We kind of went through these a little bit already. Signalized intersections, you have increased delays throughout all times of day. If it's 10 o'clock at night, you can't flip off the traffic signal. So that's kind of a problem with those. So even if we don't need it at 10 o'clock at night, you still have the traffic signal, you're still going to wait. Like I said, generally more severe crashes, or the types of crashes with that, and just the more conflict points, as opposed to at a roundabout where it's really kind of the one stage at a time that you're worried about. Roundabouts, they do take up more real estate, so they will not fit in 120 feet right away. Wherever we have those, we would need to purchase additional right away. Roundabouts, we can't really add capacity later. What we have to design it for 2050 traffic, and that's what it's going to be today. Is going to work in the future as well. But it's really hard. I mean, not that you can't go back, but it's a fairly major project to go back and add it versus popping the signal. And then I'd say driver familiarity, as we get more and more of them, this becomes less of an issue, but certainly that's something we've heard quite a bit. So these really hard to see drawings. So this would be standard intersections, and I'm not going to say signalized yet, because like I said, the day we open it, it's likely that there might not be traffic signals on the corridor. With existing traffic, it's potential for one at Horizon right away, just with existing traffic. If the fourth leg went in at Boston, that might drive that one being necessary, but it's very likely the day we open it, we wouldn't necessarily need signals at all those. This is just kind of a blown up view of that. You can see the medians get a little skinnier. We need left-hand turn lanes at the intersections. And then, like I said, and this one shows pretty well that this project would end right about that Casey's driveway, and then extend that up into the intersection of Douglas as we figure that out in the future. What the roundabouts look like. So this is a corridor with 3 roundabouts. It's not necessarily a case of do we need all 3 or do we have none? I mean, there's a potential for maybe 1 or 2, some happy medium in between. But then you kind of have only the benefits of one intersection and not necessarily the benefits of the at all intersections. This is generally what they look like. There's quite a bit that goes into the roundabout geometry. Like I said, we're trying to get people to slow down. So like this big kind of wag you see as you're coming into the roundabout, that's actually, we do that on the entry curve to get people to really slow down as they go into the roundabout. So that's where the kind of the traffic calming piece is with the roundabouts, is that it physically makes you slow down.
Those roundabouts would be the 2-lane, all the way
Yep.
around, just 1 lane.
So this might be hard for you to see, but so these are actually called a hybrid roundabout. So 2 lanes go through on the Alice's Road direction. So northbound, southbound, we have 2 lanes of traffic. And then you can kind of see right here. So if you're coming in the inside lane, and there's only 1 receiving lane on any of these side roads. So you'd actually come in the left lane, would be here, and then there's only 1 lane that goes around on the side roads. So then you turn around and you either, in this case, we actually show that all the other entrances would be right in, right out. So there's right turns are generally safer than crossing the median and doing left turns. So in this case, since it's really easy to do a U-turn at a roundabout, what that would allow you to do is actually just kind of, if I want to go there, I can come up, get spun around, and I come back this way, and I can do right turns instead of coming out and doing left turns. If I want to come out of this one, I want to go north, I can actually come out, I can spin around and go north fairly easily. That's what these are showing here. So these are hybrid roundabouts, 2 lanes on the main drag, and then the only 1 lane that turns. This horizon, this fixes that level of service S that I showed on that one. There's a right turn bypass, so a lot of this traffic comes on the horizon, turns right to the south. So right turning traffic, we keep them out of the roundabout. This is similar. I think you have kind of a similar one just east of Northwest High School. There's one with a right turn bypass. That's not a hybrid. That's a single lane roundabout. So it's a little different, but that's kind of a similar to what it would look like there. But yeah, we do that to take care of that level of service after you have them. As you can see with these though, we do need the extra right of way. These are off, so we have development pretty close up to the right up to the right of way on that west side. So that's one of the reasons we kind of offset the roundabout to the right. The other is to get that offset in there so we can really slow people down as we get into there and slow people through the corridor. You'll see on so this is the same as the displays back there. You also see the brown areas. Those are temporary construction easements. Those are just kind of shown schematically right now, but likely when we get behind the sidewalk, by the time we change grades, we got to blend those in. So that's temporary construction easements we need off of those owners to make that happen.
Question.
Sure.
You don't show any eastbound traffic out of the horizon roundabout. You know what might be planned for, is anything going to go into that space to the east of the horizon? Alice's roundabout.
Aware of no immediate plans right now, but there could be, or we could either add it now, or there could be another leg added to this roundabout where we're aware of no immediate plans for,
It's rumored that there's going to be a Sam's Club in that place. Can anyone substantiate that rumor? Did I say something I shouldn't have? Yeah.
I'm aware of this.
Okay.
So won't get into a lot on this because we have, like I said, we have to kind of figure out the geometry, what the corridor looks like first, but we are looking at managing stormwater with the project. And so this map is kind of showing you the different drainage areas. So this is kind of that big open detention basin. So this is IV, Meredith Drive. That's the data center and then the substation. Most of the area, so all the way up to about this area in here, that all, like this area here, kind of flows past the substation in front of the data center and goes out.
Is this a different topic or this is related to the previous one you were talking about the expansion road?
I'm sorry, what?
Is this a different?
No, this is, so yeah, so this is phase 1 corridor. So the phase 1 corridor starts here, goes all the way up to just about there. So this is still the phase 1 corridor. We'll do similar things with the future phases, but specifically some things we're looking at for the phase 1 corridor. So this IV and this whole area here ends up in this dry detention basin right there and comes out. When those were designed, you can see how the detention basins through the corridor. So those handle those very large 100-year events. Detain those, so the magnitude of that, 100-year events aren't the only ones we get. We get a lot smaller events than that. So what we're looking at doing is improving those areas, those detention basins, and maybe these areas. And this shows it a little better, but all the areas that come in there, we can do things to improve those. Like for the detention basin, we can change the outlet a little bit. So it detains some of those smaller storms while still accommodating the large storms. And we can do some things with the soils in the bottom of the basin that it may not look that much differently when we get it all said and done. But it will allow more of the rainwater to actually infiltrate before it gets into the creeks and streams and stuff like that, which improves water quality and some of the erosion downstream. So those are some areas we're looking at. We've talked to Midian, talked to the data center, talked to NAP, who controls that basin, and we would look at continuing to work with them to see if we can provide some stormwater management opportunities in those areas. So some of the kind of the next steps as we move forward here again for phase one, we got to finalize the project footprint. So in the fairly near future, kind of have to make a decision on the roundabouts versus signals. So if we do need additional right of way, we can go out and negotiate that with property owners. The stormwater design will continue that. So we'll continue to finalize those stormwater management areas. Landscape design. So after we know what the roadway will look like, then we'll move forward with the landscaping concepts. This area is Waukee and Clive, as you're well aware. So we kind of look at the phase one project as more of a transition area. The north of Douglas, that'll probably look a lot different, but in this will probably let you know you're in both Waukee and Clive. And then the next phases will look a little different to show you that you transition to Clive. There will be additional public input or opportunities for public input. When you see us this fall, there'll be some more definitive plans there. I can tell you a lot more about construction staging and stuff like that. So then in the winter or early spring of next year, we can actually go out and take bids from contractors would be the ideal situation. Construction start spring of 2025 or early summer 2025 is what we're shooting for. Kind of separate from that, you'll also be seeing some public input opportunities for those future phases as we look at alternatives and the design of those corridors as well. So with that, there are tons of ways you can give us comments, and we'd love your comments. There's a paper form sitting on the desk. They actually have that QR code would actually take you to a form the same one this one will. And then there's also the project email address. We don't really care how you give us comments, just please give us comments. So however you decide to do it, be aware that if you don't want to really give us your contact information, even with the online survey, there's an opportunity for you to stay anonymous and not give us that contact information, just give us your comment. But we'd really like your contact information because that's how we're going to continue to get information out. We're going to use that as a mailing list. So then we're going to make sure you're aware of future public input opportunities as well. And then the best place is obviously the, I think these are around on the table too. So that's the comment form. The QR code on this one is different. That goes directly to the comment form. We can go ahead and fill these out, drop them in the box back there, mail them to us, email them to us, anything you want. This, the only thing really useful on this form that I haven't told you already is this links to the project website. This is on the City of Clive website. And also has the email address on there, but we'll continue to we'll put this recording of this meeting, some of these displays, we'll continue to put that information out on that site. So keep checking. There'll be a link to the form as well if you want to provide comments through that.
Hey, question for you.
Sure.
Thank you for providing that input about my question. Can you please tell me overall the cost of the project, what we are roughly, what we are talking about?
For phase one, we were roughly putting you on the spot. Roughly $10 million, I believe, was the cost of the phase one.
If you're going with the roundabouts, which I think are better because you gave your traffic signals in this town.
And that's the guy back there that times them all. So. Please go ahead.
Anyway, why go with 2 lanes each direction instead of just 1 lane each direction with a turn lane? since you get the roundabouts that aren't slowing, they're slowing traffic down, but they're not delaying traffic.
Really a capacity issue.
Yeah, it kind of gets into what we're building for in 2050. I mean, we're at that point, like you're talking about the 2 lanes with a turn lane, we're looking at capacity for that 15,000, and you saw our projections were 16,000. So if something gets built a little bit more dense, now the traffic volumes go up higher. So we might be pushing 20,000. So we'd be having to come back and potentially reconstruct that cross section if we went with that 3-lane option.
And those are averages over the day, so there's peak hours in there
If you have a
too.
population of Waukee of 35,000 right now, by 2050, it'll probably be 50,000, you'll have more income to pay for put in.
True. Yes, you're right. But at this point, yeah, we're kind of looking at continuing the 4-lane cross section that they have 6 lanes to the south, and I believe Urbandale has built 4 lanes to the north.
Yeah.
So we're kind of trying to fill the gap between those. So that's why we kind of targeted the 4-lane corridor through here. So kind of consistency that way, but yet trying to change it up with potentially roundabouts if we end up going that direction.
You'll have to change from a 3-lane to a 4-lane divided, and so we've been building pavement the last 50 to 70 years. So before the pavement life would be up, we potentially need to be reconstructing it, whether or not throw that away too. So we're trying to look out and, build it to get us through that.
Okay, and then, the 120-foot right of way, is that 60 foot on each side of the existing?
So section, yeah, it's, there's a section line 60 foot east. So this is obviously offset
Yeah.
to the east, but yes, that's 60 foot either
And
side. of the
that,
section.
that light colored green there on the bottom, that's additional.
That would be additional.
Yeah.
So all the cost would be split between Clyde and Waukee?
Yeah.
Is that-
Yeah, and this section is basically split.
Is there any percentage, like how much the Clyde is going to be or
I
something?
believe it's split right down the middle.
approximately 50-50.
Oh,
Can you tell me what the plan is for directing or redirecting traffic? I don't know if it's going to be free when construction is going on.
Yeah, so that's something we have to do that kind of further on in design a little bit, and we'll come up with a detailed staging plan. We haven't really made a decision yet if we're gonna close it to only, we obviously maintain access to the residents, but as far as traffic through the corridor, if we redirect that elsewhere, it probably depends on if we build the more standard intersections and you can kind of build half at a time versus these get a little more difficult to stage as well. And that might lend itself to shutting down the corridor to most of the traffic. But that is something we do with the design.
So yeah, if there's 100% city funded, there's no federal funds with this
In phase one.
in phase 1. So does that mean there's no assessments to any of the budding properties for this project?
I mean, yeah.
Not on Waukee side, Matt, do you want to speak?
I would say on the Clyde side for, I wouldn't say no assessments, depend on the development ground. We still have ground that would be subject to development. We're not gonna be assessing any existing residential properties, at least that hasn't been the council's intent. But there is ground to the north of you that is subject to future development that already has zoning on it. That we could potentially have as a future assessment for those properties. But there hasn't been any final decisions.
Okay, there was somebody said on to the residents that
There'll be a lot of notifications.
Before we get-
A lot of official notifications that we would have to do if that's the route we go. That is something we're talking about though, just particularly for the development ground, it's similar to how we handle every arterial roadway. And any assessments that we've done to the developments are subject to what a standard assessment would be for a regular road. Not for the 5-lane section, we a regular 31 foot street.
Okay, thank you.
Good question.
Is the decision to do roundabouts or a regular intersection gonna come down to the city? It's making the decision, Clyde and Waukee, is that how it's gonna come about?
Yes, yeah, it'll have to be discussion between those two communities.
And input from citizens weigh in on that? 'Cause
Yep.
I'm not a roundabout fan at I drive one, on Douglas Parkway, 156 every week and get hit almost every time. So, I think it's because of not being,
42nd Douglas.
or 142nd.
There have been a few design standard updates since that one was initially constructed, and we'll be using the most recent version, but understood that it's a concern,
Yeah,
yes.
and I drive it all peak times, so.
So one of the things, now that you mentioned that. Yeah, so we are, because I've heard that quite a bit about 142nd and Douglas, and one of the things that can happen, especially with a 2-lane roundabout, again, it's designed for traffic for the next 25 to 30 years. So what people can tend to do is, okay, I'm in the right lane and then I skip over the left lane and I skip back to the right lane, so they try to drive it a little faster. We try to do some geometry things, so this is kind of splitting those entry lanes apart. You probably don't see that at 142nd and Douglas, where it'll split those apart to try to get people in the right lane and force them to drive the way we want.
So is that green like a raised median?
So the green is, yes, the green is the raised median. So, this, area is here, and then, like in this area, that is creating a pedestrian refuge. So the pedestrians would cross there, then, they kind of have a refuge there, and then they go that way. So that's one of the things with roundabouts is, the driver's coming in, they worry about the pedestrian first, yield to the pedestrian, they get past them, and they yield to the person in the circle. And then as they drive through, they have to yield again if there's someone in that.
I have a question for you. Sure. 3 is such a short distance. I mean, that seems like way overkill to slow people down, 3 of them in that short of a distance.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily 3 to just slow people down. It's 3 because, there eventually needs to be some kind of intersection control at those major intersections. Right. So that's really the reason for the roundabouts. If you you could. Yeah, so let's pretend there's one at Boston, and then you had a signal at Horizon and a signal maybe someday at Delwood. Then you wouldn't necessarily get the all of the benefits of having the roundabout, simply because you would have people would still have to stop at a signal, you'd have all that delay, and then they could drive through at Boston, but then they'd have to stop again at
One thing I'll also point out is we looked at the crashes at Douglas and 142nd. There are a lot. I think in the last 5 years, there were like 60 some crashes that occurred at that intersection. But of those, there might have been 5 injury crashes, like minor injury or possible injury crashes. As Gabe mentioned out earlier in the presentation, south of Douglas, there was 15 crashes and 7 of them were injury. So almost a 50% crash rate of being injured. So we'd be looking at, even though it does cause crashes, or the crashes do occur at 142nd and Douglas, they tend to be less severe than other intersections. So that's one consideration that we're making is this on the safety side that we have to look at.
Okay, at that point, are you guys kind of convincing us between the roundabout and signals? Or you guys already made up your mind?
We're just trying to give you facts.
Yeah, we're trying to give you the facts, and that's what we really want.
We want your input so your input will go into the council's decision as to whether we do move forward with the regular intersections or roundabouts. Or a combination thereof.
Just to give you feedback, that's really what you want. I love the roundabout. I think it's great. Hates it and lights, so I'm encouraged by this.
Have you guys studied the roundabouts that are at the east of lines, where they have a dedicated right turn lane? Those are very efficient.
Yes, so that's what this one would be. So there, we look at the traffic, the kind of the traffic movements through there. This has a very heavy people turning right at this intersection. So that's where we would have the right turn bypass, because we have so much traffic that we want to keep out of the roundabout. Any other questions?
Someone mentioned the concern about where does all this traffic go if the project closes Alice's Road? Does the cost of wear and tear on those neighborhood streets come into the budget, as far as if we divert Alice's Road traffic to parallel streets, they're gonna wear out faster? Is that a consideration at all as you walk your way through the decisions.
Yeah, that's something we look at appropriate deep sign detours for those routes, what roads can handle it, what roads can't. If there's a bunch of residents along one street and we have a bunch of parking, if that's an issue as well. So yeah, we definitely look at that for the detour routes. Any questions? Any questions online?
I'm just checking, Gabe.
We have one more for you. Has there been any studies on like emergency vehicles trying to get around and that kind of thing, or also road cleaning type, like for snow and stuff? Because to me, it seems like the roundabout would be a lot harder to keep clean. I mean, make more time, more emissions, that kind of.
Fire truck get through.
Yeah.
I mean, on Boston Parkway, there is a 55+ community that has fire trucks over there at least once a day.
So, yeah, so what you're, not seeing real well on here is, these are designed so, actually semis can get through them as well. There's actually a truck apron on the inside, so when you notice the inside of a roundabout, the curb's fairly gentle on that side, and you might have a different color pavement. That's called the truck apron, and that's actually meant for larger vehicles to kind of hop the curb and go through there. I believe at one of the council meetings, I think it was the city of Clive, fire chief indicated that even the small traffic circles and some of the neighborhood traffic circles, they can get their semi trucks, their ladder trucks through those. So these would be much like it.
And the one advantage with the multiple lanes is you could then potentially cone off one lane due to an accident or pavement rehabilitation or repair. Let's say there's a blow up or a crack or something we need to address. It actually gives us more flexibility with the multiple lanes versus the single lanes. Really, then you're closing it completely and diverting traffic around there.
Yeah, here.
If Berkshire Parkway is considered for a detour, would there be additional stop signs added, particularly north of Douglas?
Something, yeah. So we would look at the detour routes. If we select some detour routes, we would look at what we would need to do if it's appropriate detour route and if the traffic control is appropriate. Okay,
that's it.
Anything else? So yeah, we got the forms, we got the online. Please give us your comments. You can either, if you want to fill them out tonight, you can drop them in the box, you can email them, you can do the form thing. So really appreciate the discussion, appreciate you coming out this evening.